Hey guys, welcome back. I hope everybody is staying warm out there because here where I live in the South, we are getting ready for a giant ice storm. So that's going to be great fun. But thanks for joining me again for this part 4 of the Idaho 4 series. In the last video, we talked about the crime scene, the 911 call, how the victims were found and their injuries. And in this one, we're going to take a look at the rest of the crime scene and the evidence found on it. So without further ado, let's get back to our Idaho 4 deep dive. Dun 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 dun. Because I still don't have that intro. I do want to clarify something before we begin. I have seen several comments of people asking basically what my theory is or what I'm trying to prove. So I'd like everyone to understand, I have not aligned myself with any narrative, mainstream or otherwise. All I can offer is the facts that have come out and my personal opinion and perspective and questions on it. I don't actually have a theory to prove. And I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I want you to decide for yourself what you believe. And know that I still respect your opinion, whether you agree with me or not. So, as most people are aware, there was a photo drop that happened about 2 days ago. The Idaho State Police released nearly 3,000 photos of the crime scene and then quickly took them back. They have been completely wiped from the Idaho State Police website, completely wiped from the internet, except for all the people that managed to download them before they were taken back, like me. I think the reason that they were taken back is because some of the photos were not redacted properly. In some of them, you could see parts of the victims that were not supposed to be visible. Like in one, you could see part of Xana's arm and part of her face. And it was very difficult to look at. And so many of those photos, especially the ones from Xana's room, were very, very graphic. I can't even repost them. I can't even put them on here. It's just too much. It's way too much. But luckily, we do have some of those photos to use now, which is going to be really helpful as we go through this. So let's get started and take a look at the evidence found on scene. One of the very first things everyone notices when looking at the crime scene photos is how clean this crime scene was. I mean, the house was messy. They had just had a party the night before. And they're a bunch of college students, so of course their house is a little messy. But when you go through the photos of the house, the first floor, the living room, the stairs, the third floor, the kitchen, where is all the blood? We know that Xana and Ethan were found in Xana's room, and Kaylee and Maddie were found in Maddie's. And both of those rooms obviously had significant blood in them. Though in Maddie's room, it does appear that it was mostly contained to the bed. In Xana's room, there was quite a bit in multiple areas. Several of y'all may remember this photo that was circulating around at the beginning of the case. It shows blood leaking on the outside of the house. Well, that wall is actually Xana's bedroom wall. For a long time, there were people trying to argue that, saying it was radiator fluid or some other kind of fluid. But no, that actually was blood. And it was coming from Ethan. The way he was positioned, his head was kind of hanging between the bed and the wall. And we know Ethan had that major throat injury. So the way he was laying caused blood to pool right there at that crack of that wall. So it managed to leak out through the baseboard. But other than in Xana and Maddie's room, there's really not much of anything. There's visibly nothing. How is there not a bunch of blood through this house? Where is the blood trail? Because what I don't understand is, you mean to tell me that one man inflicted over 100 stab wounds on 4 different people, and he also managed to not get any blood on his shoes? How? Tell me how. I'd love to know how. I don't know. But one thing for sure, there's absolutely no blood trail. At a glance, without looking into Xana and Maddie's room, and without looking super closely at the rest of the house, you wouldn't even know that anything bad had happened there. I really don't understand how that wasn't a huge red flag to investigators. But I also want to circle back to this 911 call for a minute. A lot of people seem surprised that I'm not more suspicious of Hunter Johnson or their report of an unconscious person. And I don't know, y'all, I'm just not. All I can ever offer is my honest opinion, though that opinion is subject to change based on new information. But I will tell y'all always if I change my mind on something. But as of right now, no, I'm just not suspicious of Hunter Johnson or Emily Latent. Obviously, Dylan and Bethany were going to stick to their story of not knowing anything, of not knowing what was going on, of not seeing anything, of not hearing anything. And so there's nothing weird about Hunter and Emily's behavior to me, if that's all they were told. But I will tell you what is weird to me, and that is the police's behavior. While I'm not suspicious of Hunter Johnson, at the point that the police realized that there were murder victims in that house, the police should have been suspicious of him immediately. He should have been treated like a suspect immediately. I mean, you had 4 stabbing victims and a guy standing there with a knife. Anyone else in any other crime would have been immediately escorted to a cruiser, and those girls outside would have been separated and questioned. But they didn't do any of that. I've actually never seen the police so nonchalant in the middle of a horrific crime scene. I truly do not understand a lot of what they did here and what they didn't do. Just like Officer No Gloves Gunnarsson over here, walking through the crime scene, touching everything with bare hands. So even though the Moscow Police Department did not seem alarmed by the absence of blood trailed throughout this house, I guess we really shouldn't be surprised, because they didn't quite seem like they knew what they were doing from the get-go. And I don't want to mislead y'all. There was blood in this house, a good amount of it, just not what you would expect, not visible blood like you would expect. In Idaho State Police document number 32, it says there were multiple areas with what appeared to be blood on the beer pong table. On the half wall leading to Xana's room, there were multiple drops and runs of red liquid. And on the wall above the staircase, there appeared to be cast off. And there was blood on the wall near Xana's door. There were blood drops near the baseboard of the bathroom door and a small smear on the wall along with hair. Going up to the third floor, it's noted that there were blood smears on the center wall banister of the stairs. And in the kitchen, it was noted there was a Jack-in-the-Box bag with Xana's name on it. And on the outside of the kitchen window, they found a very creepy possible face print and 2 handprints, like someone had pressed their face and hands against the glass from the outside. The sliding door in the kitchen was found halfway open, and there were footprints in the snow going from the door across the back porch. It says in the Moscow Police Department document number 4 that Officer Smith took photos of these prints with a measuring tape. He watched the backyard area to make sure no one else came into the area. And well, I hope that happened before we see this guy stomping around on those footprints in this body cam footage. Why would he do that? Why would he step there? Very unprofessional. But this report goes on to say, I noticed there were a few footprints that left towards the west of the backyard. This portion of the backyard is connected to 2 other residences, 1118 King Road and 1126 King Road, both directly to the west. The footprints appear to lead west towards King Road between the residences. And these footprints were reported to be very large, obviously a man's footprint, and they measured at 13.5 to 14 inches. But that sliding door being open reminds me of something that several people mentioned in the comments in the last video. A report from a neighbor who was walking his dog that morning on November 13th, 2022, and noticed the front door of the King Road house standing open. This is from the Moscow Police Department document number 20. He states that between 9 to 10 a.m. he was walking his dog and noticed the front door standing open. And on the walk back around 11 a.m., it was still open. I've been thinking that he likely meant the sliding door, that the sliding door was open since they all used it as the front door. But that was incorrect because no, it does specify here that the door was on the north side facing campus. So he's definitely talking about the front door. But there's other reports from other neighbors, like a girl in the Idaho State Police document number 70, who reported that she also went for a walk around 7 to 7:15 a.m. And she passed by the King Road house and she didn't notice anything unusual. There was no mention of that front door standing open. And in Hunter Johnson's interview, he stated that he had to enter the code to unlock the front door. So I don't know, y'all. These are all conflicting statements, but maybe they are all telling the truth. Maybe that door was closed at 7 a.m., but open when the guy saw it between 9 and 10 a.m. But it was closed again by the time Hunter Johnson arrived at almost noon. Or someone's lying. Seems like that's the only 2 options here, but I don't know which one is the truth. But I am glad y'all reminded me of that because I'd forgotten about it. And speaking of doors, I also want to point out here that the other sliding door in the King Road house, the sliding door in Kaylee's room that goes out to the balcony, that door was also found to be unlocked. But while searching the crime scene, the investigators found several items that they collected into evidence. In the living room, they found a black backpack. And outside the residence, they found a black cooler bag. This was found in the backyard area. But they also found a paper note in the front parking area. This paper note was just a piece of paper with some writing on it. And it was found in the front parking area of the King Road house near the black Ford Explorer. And that note shows up in the evidence lists. And I've always wondered what in the world that note said. And now we know, because a picture of it was included in the photo dump that we just got. It looks alarming at first, because what it says is Die Mogan. But once you sit with it for a minute, I do think that this note actually says Maddie Mogan, but the paper is folded in half. The MAD was just on one side of the crease and the D was on the other side of the crease. But that also is just an assumption, really, because there wasn't a picture of that note opened up in any way. But that is the assumption that I'm going with. In Xana's room, they found 2 rolled up dollar bills and some blue powder. This ended up being exactly what I thought it was, a 10 milligram Adderall, just crushed up. Because apparently Xana and Ethan were known to use Adderall recreationally while they were partying. For everyone who is not prescribed that medication, who doesn't have ADHD, that medicine will hype you up. It's a stimulant. It will wake you up. So a lot of kids use it to just keep partying longer. It's an incredibly common thing for college kids to do. When I was in my 20s, my friends did that too. Then in Maddie's room, in the bed with the 2 girls, 3 items were found. Kaylee's iPhone was found under her head. And underneath her body was a Juul vape pen. This can be found in the Idaho State Police document number 32, if you doubt me on that. But a vape was found underneath Kaylee in the bed. What do we know about a vape? She was texting Jack Decor about coming to get his vape. At 2:15 a.m., she texted him and said, "I have your vape and you can come get it." Jack's vape being found underneath Kaylee. That weirded me out. I'd also like to know, if Kaylee was texting Jack at 2:15 a.m. about that vape, why was she still holding it at 4 a.m. when she was supposed to be attacked? That vape makes all my hair stand up. I don't like it. And then, as we all know, beside Maddie, partially hidden by the blanket, was the sheath. And look how clean it is. How is it so clean when it was laying up against Maddie, and her and Kaylee both were covered in the reported large amount of blood? This dang thing looks brand new. And what gets me to is this. They did not find that sheath at first. It wasn't discovered until the 3rd walkthrough, right before they were getting ready to transport the bodies. But I'd like to know how. How did they not discover that at first? Because the photo drop also included photos of the sheath found on the scene. And according to all the police reports, the sheath was found up against Maddie's right side, hidden by the blanket. But I'm sorry, this ain't hidden. I'm not even sure I would have described it as partially covered, since it's pretty well sticking out. How did they miss that? It even looks out of place. Not just by how clean it is, but just the way it's laying. That does not appear like it had been sitting there very long. And here's another great mystery. We all know that it was on the underside of the snap button of the sheath that had that spot of touch DNA that was eventually matched to Brian Kohberger. But what many people don't seem to know, or at least don't want to acknowledge, is that that spot of touch DNA wasn't the only DNA found on that sheath. Though it is too small to notice in these pictures without someone pointing it out, there actually were 2 tiny blood spots on the back of this sheath. Those blood spots were found to be a DNA mix. The major contributor was found to be Kaylee. The possible minor contributor was Maddie. Then another DNA mix was found on the edges of the handle portion of the sheath, this area right at the top. And in that DNA mix, it was found that at least 1 contributor was male. Then another 2-person DNA mix was found on the edges of the knife portion of the sheath, and at least one of those contributors was male. Another thing I do not understand about that sheath is how it was even left behind in the first place. These things are designed to hook onto a belt, but it doesn't snap onto a belt. You have to feed the belt through that loop at the top. And once that sheath is on, you would have to remove your belt to take it off. So I don't understand that. And I know some people will say, well, he probably just carried it inside. Why would he do that? If he's such a criminology mastermind, wouldn't he know to attach the sheath so that it doesn't accidentally get left behind? That seems like a dumb criminal blunder. And BK is a super ninja, remember? Regardless of how it got there, the sheath was found, and it became the most important piece of evidence in this case. But the knife itself, the actual murder weapon, was never located. All in all, there's not a whole lot of evidence described in these police reports. But luckily, the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab reports gives us a more comprehensive list of all the evidence that was collected. Their report lists 61 areas in the King Road house that were tested for blood, and 50 of them came back positive. Many of those areas were in Xana's room, the 2nd floor west bedroom, or in Maddie's room, the 3rd floor east bedroom. But there was also blood found in the stairway area between the 1st and 2nd floors, on the beer pong table in the living room, and to the right of the bar cart near it. There was additional blood found in the hallway to Xana's room. There was blood in the stairway of the 2nd and 3rd floor, on the 3rd floor bathroom door, on the ceiling outside of Maddie's bedroom, on the exterior of her door, and the interior of her door. Let's talk about that blood found on the 3rd floor, the blood outside of Maddie's room. The blood found on the banister between the 2nd and the 3rd floor was always dismissed as blood transfer from the killer. But how did blood get on the ceiling outside of Maddie's bedroom door if her and Kaylee were attacked in the bed inside her room? Doesn't seem like it would come from the killer brushing up against the ceiling. Seems to me that it's more likely cast off from someone attacked outside that room, which is not what the official narrative says happened. Also very interesting is that blood found between the 1st and 2nd floor. Because once again, according to the official narrative, nobody with blood on them, neither the killer or the victims, should have gone down those stairs to that 1st floor at any point, ever. Only the surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, who were locked inside Bethany's room. But there were roughly 9 spots of blood found in that stairway, and there were also some discoveries in the vacant room on the 1st floor, all of which seem notable to me. There was a jacket, there was a blanket, and a broken Scentsy light. Well, actually, now that I think about it, that blanket might have been found in a different room. But the jacket and the Scentsy light definitely were in the vacant room. And that blanket and that jacket is notable. But we're going to circle back to that in a different video when we talk about all the labs. But that broken Scentsy light was documented in the field notes of one of the Idaho State Police analysis. This is from Lab 11. And this crime scene lady wrote, one victim mentioned a flash of light, broken Scentsy in vacant room. She's talking about Bethany and her firework in a flash. But I'm not really following what she thinks the broken Scentsy light has to do with that firework in a flash. But it is interesting to me that Dylan Mortensen mentioned that same Scentsy light in her November 17th interview. In that interview, they were asking her what lights were on when she was running down to Bethany's room. And she said the twinkle lights were on. She thinks, because, Dylan doesn't know anything for sure. But in that interview, Dylan states, and we have this little Scentsy thing. I don't know if it's on. We're pretty good at turning it on and off, so it's not like going on through all night. But it does have a light. I don't know if that was on. So they asked her where the Scentsy light was located. And she said it was on the little table next to the couch. But it wasn't. It was actually found broken in that vacant bedroom on the 1st floor. But I wanted to bring this up because Dylan brings up some very specific and sometimes seemingly random details. This sometimes makes me wonder if we should all be paying more attention to these seemingly random details she brings up and almost seems to fixate on at times. Like she brings up this Scentsy light, like the fixation with the bushy eyebrows. She mentions a black truck, the mini vacuum thing. So stay with me here because I'm working my way up to my point on this. Another thing I noticed in the Idaho State Police forensics lady's notes, that several bloodstains, quite a few of them, appeared diluted. I also noticed that all the ones she marked as diluted were outside of the 2 bedrooms. None of the stains found in Xana and Maddie's room were found to be diluted like that. On the crime scene, they were using a chemical called amido black. This is how they were searching for latent fingerprints and latent footprints. And amido black is a stain used in forensics to detect faint blood stains and enhance latent fingerprints. It reacts with the protein found in blood, and it turns this light blue chemical into a dark blue to black color when it is reacting to blood proteins. And there are a lot of photos where you can see this amido black on the scene. So another thing interesting to me is that all the possible blood that the officers noted in the kitchen, on the cabinets, by the sink, the spot on the floor, all of those tested negative for blood in presumptive tests, but they still covered this kitchen with amido black. All the counters, even the floor is blue. And while all the light blue here is the chemical itself, everywhere you see light blue, that is the actual amido black itself. I don't understand though how the darker areas, these dark blue areas, like right here by the sink, aren't reacting to blood. But apparently there are multiple forensics experts out here on YouTube and on TikTok that have explained how that's not the case, that those dark blue areas are not reacting to blood. And like I've said before, I don't have enough personal forensics knowledge to interpret stuff like this or know if these experts are telling the truth. But some of the colors here in the kitchen are also the same color as the latent prints that the amido black helped identify, the same blue-black color, which leads me into the 6 latent prints found on scene. These 6 prints were important, and they're all labeled L1 through 6, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L6. 2 of those latents were collected from the kitchen window, the handprints and the face print. 2 were fingerprints found on the sliding glass door. And 1 was a footprint found in Xana's room. And then there was 1 more latent footprint, L4, that was found on the threshold of Dylan's bedroom. And that particular latent print is of great interest to me. It states in the probable cause affidavit that during the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by the ISP forensic team, by first using a presumptive blood test and then amido black, a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. The detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern similar to the pattern of Vans type shoe sole, just outside the door of Dylan's bedroom. And they used this latent print to confirm Dylan's testimony. They say that it is consistent with DM's statement regarding the suspect's path of travel. And that latent print has long been a hot topic of discussion. But thanks to that photo drop, we also got our first look at that latent footprint. And y'all, what is this? Look how closely that print is to the threshold of her room. See where that yellow marker is? That's where the print is. The toe of the shoe is basically in that little corner of her door jamb. And while the PCA says that the print confirms the killer's path of travel, to me it doesn't look like that print was of someone just walking past her room. I would expect it to be a little further away from her door. The way I see it, the only thing I can figure out is that that print means one of 2 things. Either this dude stopped at Dylan's door, like stepped into the door and like put his ear up to it, something. Or her door was open when that print was left. No one casually walking by is going to put their foot in that spot. That's not a normal stepping spot. But this print has always deeply bothered me because it also suggests something that most people blatantly ignore. The word latent literally means invisible, not visible to the naked eye. Sometimes that can mean that a print is just faint, that it was actually there, but just really faint. But in this case, that shoe print was not there at all. It wasn't discovered until the second processing of the scene. So many people went through that house when this first occurred on November 13th. The second processing didn't take place till a day or 2 later. Maybe longer than that, actually. I don't technically remember when the second processing happened, but it wasn't the day of. The shoe print was only found using the chemical, which begs the question, who cleaned up this shoe print? For it to not be visible, for it to not be there, when all these different investigators are walking up and down those stairs to the 3rd floor, walking all through this house, that means that latent print had to be wiped away. Who wiped it away? And why is that not a bigger cause for concern? And an even better question, actually, is what exactly did Miss ISP forensics lady, I think her name's Jenny Ayers, that's what it was, mean in her notes when she documented 33 additional potential footwear impressions with the same diamond pattern, not photographed due to previous discussion of officer footprints? What previous discussion? And why does it seem like she's saying that either MPD contaminated the scene or straight up told her not to document it? Maybe I'm jumping to conclusions there, but you're telling me that they found 35 bloody footprints with the same diamond-shaped pattern that were not visible to the naked eye. Well, there's our blood trail. It was just cleaned up. Is that not what that means? Is there another meaning for that? Can y'all think of another reason that many footprints would be latent, not visible? If you can think of a reason, I'd really like to hear it. But it seems to me that those footprints, those latent footprints, might be part of what the defense expert Brent Turvey was expected to testify about at the trial. It says here in this court document that he asserts there is direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspects to clean up the crime scene after the homicides, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. And it appears that defense expert Brent Turvey also was planning to testify about his expert opinion that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Is that not what a bunch of us have been saying? He goes on to assert that there was a cleanup, that multiple weapons were used against Kaylee, and that Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Oh, but all of us asking questions are just a bunch of crazy, terrible conspiracy theorists, huh? Is this defense expert Brent Turvey, was he a conspiracy theorist too? But what Brent Turvey said is exactly what I think happened here too. We're going to come back to this in just a second. But it seems that this blood trail was cleaned up. Then there's diluted blood stains. Diluted, as we know, means something is watered down. Those diluted blood stains were found on the first and second floors. And then we even have an expert that was going to testify about the evidence of a cleanup, which leads me circling back to those random details given by Dylan. Is this why Dylan Mortensen originally described the unknown item that she didn't know what it was, that was carried by the masked man dressed all in black that she's seen in her house? Is this why she described that as a mini vacuum? Was Dylan hinting at a cleanup, either purposefully or subconsciously? And in that line of thought, could Dylan actually have revealed several small truths hidden in her story? Again, either on purpose, because she knows some things that she does not feel safe saying, or subconsciously, while weaving a lie. Because that is something I've noticed about her. Some details that she gives are so highly specific. And those same highly specific details also seem to reflect something about her life. For instance, one of the best examples, Dylan claims that all she remembers about the intruder was his bushy eyebrows. Well, on November 19th, a forensics team did a search of Dylan's bedroom. And it stated in Idaho State Police Document 88 because of the bloody footprint outside of her room that was believed to belong to Koberger. But while searching her room, they photographed the bedroom with an emphasis upon her wall hangings and artwork. This artwork was of eyes, with an emphasis on the eyebrows. They're pinned to corkboards along with cutouts from magazines. The eyebrows on her walls were described as big, fluffy, or even objectively bushy. As we can see with our very own eyes, Dylan already had a thing about bushy eyebrows. Then in one of her interviews, she mentions a black truck, that she randomly looked out the window and noticed a black truck driving by. Well, it's also funny weird, not ha-ha funny, that the vehicle driven by her boyfriend, Quinn Kelly, is also a big black truck. Here she is posed in front of it. Then Dylan brings up the Scentsy burner in the living room. Maybe it was on. Well, then that Scentsy burner is found broken in the first floor vacant room. Oh, and that weird sentence that she heard the intruder say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," or "It's okay, I'm here to help you." That is a line straight out of the Vampire Diaries. Straight out of it. Somebody found the exact episode. I can't find it again because it was somebody on TikTok. There's a bunch of really talented internet sleuths on that app. And somebody was able to find that exact episode where they say exactly what Dylan says that the killer said. "It's okay, I'm going to help you." I'll see if I can find that exact episode before I post this so that I can tell y'all what it is.
You're going to be okay. No, it's okay, I'm here to help.
Get away from
It's okay, I'm here to help you.
But it's interesting, very interesting indeed, that Vampire Diaries was the show that her and Bethany and Lakeland were watching before everybody else came home. And then at 4 a.m., some random guy breaks into their house and kills her roommates and happens to say that exact same line. I don't know, y'all. Whether she means to or not, I really do think that Dylan is dropping hints. And I believe the possibility, the very real possibility of a cleanup of this scene is exactly why she said that the killer was holding a mini vacuum. In my opinion, of course. That's just my opinion. But it does make me want to comb through her statements again really carefully and find all the little highly specific details she gives. But let's return to the multiple assailant thing that the defense expert was going to testify about. Brent Turvey states that multiple weapons were used against Kaylee. And like we talked about in the last video, in part 3, Kaylee had really serious, really devastating, blunt force injuries that left her entire facial structure, all the bones in her face, extremely damaged. Kaylee was disfigured, unrecognizable. And her dad has mentioned multiple times in multiple different situations that there was evidence of her possibly being gagged because there were imprints of lines left around her mouth. either from the object gagging her or from the second weapon used against her. And there is one more specific item that Dylan mentioned in her interview. And actually, so did Bethany. Both girls told the exact same story about a day that the roommates came home and found the door open. And even their friends on scene repeat the story. So they all talked about this while they were sitting outside the house. They all told a story about how one day, earlier in November, I think they said, I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure they said it was around November 4th. So not long before this happened. One day, all of the roommates came home and they found their front door open when they got home. So they all went in and they grabbed golf clubs from the vacant room on the first floor. And then they checked the house with them, carrying the golf clubs. All the girls walking around carrying their little golf club weapons, looking for an intruder because their door was open. Now, this is all speculation. Okay, this is pure 100% speculation. Please do not try to quote me like I'm trying to tell you a fact. Speculatory only. But what if, just what if, Kaylee or Maddie happened to still have one of those golf clubs in their rooms or up in that main hallway on the third floor? Or, big or, what if Kaylee was on the second floor with Murphy when all this began? And what if Kaylee ran downstairs to that first floor where those golf clubs were to grab one? That's obviously the weapon that they all first thought of when they thought there was an intruder. Grab a golf club. So what if Kaylee heard or saw Maddie being attacked? Her very best friend in the whole wide world. There is nothing about Kaylee's personality and the way that she is portrayed by all of her family and all of her friends that would make me believe that she wouldn't run headfirst into that room where her best friend was being attacked. I believe wholeheartedly that Kaylee would have defended Maddie to the death. Maybe she did. So let's say, what if Kaylee saw or heard Maddie being attacked and she grabs one of those golf clubs? And what if Kaylee goes for that attacker? Maybe she even manages to hit the guy with it. Possibly even knocks the knife from his hand. That would hurt. And it would possibly make that guy super angry. So say, hypothetically, the guy drops the knife and he grabs the golf club. And he takes the golf club from her. And he beats her with it. Out of rage. Out of surprise. And then mad that hurt. Or maybe she didn't even manage to hit him. But maybe just the surprise of it, of being interrupted. Rage is an emotion. That would invoke emotion. And if you look closely at a golf club, well, golf clubs have lines on it. If she was hit with one of those clubs with enough force, would it leave lines on her face? And I think this hypothetical speculation is actually a good question too, because of that blood cast off found on the wall above the stairway to the first floor. That blood on that wall, those blood spots were matched to Kaylee. And look, I don't want to feed too much into this hypothetical scenario, but if you factor in a second assailant who could have possibly attacked her from behind, giving her some asphyxial injuries and making her let go of that golf club, that could explain all of her injuries. Sharp force injuries, blunt force injuries, asphyxial injuries. And I do find it also notable that one of the things the police took was Ethan's golf clubs. They took them as evidence. And the last I heard, Ethan's family still had not received those back. They received almost everything else, except his golf clubs. And last I heard, they still didn't have them. They may have gotten them back by now, I'm not sure. Did they? Do any of y'all know if Ethan's family ever got his golf clubs back? There's also another thing of interest hidden in these crime scene documents, which was also hinted at by Dylan, actually. Since at one point, she also described the unidentified object held by the perpetrator not just as a mini vacuum, but also as possibly a gun. We know that Bethany described a firecracker in a flash. And as I've said before, I still don't know what she could be describing. But the most simplest explanation for what that could be is a gunshot. But none of the victims had gunshot wounds, right? Since they didn't have any, right? Why did the forensics team, in their briefing notes, mark firearms related under the type of evidence that the scene included? You can see it right here. The little box next to firearm related, it's marked. Why would they have that marked? That particular detail gives me significant pause because it immediately reminded me of a very bizarre statement, a pretty alarming tip reported in the Idaho State Police document number 173. This report was about a guy who had his uncle's ATF hat and jacket and put them on and waltzed into the crime scene as the bodies were being removed. He said all the victims were double tapped, but made no mention of anyone being stabbed. I had to look up what double tapped meant. And apparently double tapped means shot twice. I am wondering though, could double tapped mean shot and stabbed? Because somebody else brought up in the comments that was it possible that some of the injuries were covering up gunshot wounds? And I actually have wondered that same thing. I was even talking to my husband about this not long ago, asking him if he thought it was possible to cover up a gunshot wound by multiple other wounds. Basically, like, could you stab someone on a gunshot wound enough that it no longer can be detected as a gunshot wound? And he was of the opinion that yes, that is possible. Now, that's just my husband's opinion, but I am curious about y'all's opinion on that. Do y'all think that's possible? Could that be done? Could you actually disguise a gunshot wound with other wounds? Because whether that tip was BS or not, why exactly they marked this firearms box is a very interesting question, because I can't think of anything else that would have been firearm related found on the scene. There's also one more important item that was found at the crime scene, and it also wasn't found at first. Some sources say the Moscow Police Department didn't even find it at all, that an independent detective found it days later. And that detective stated in an interview that he doesn't understand how the police officers didn't find it, because he said that glove was sitting out in the open in that front parking area of the King Road house. But it is interesting that both that detective and lead investigator Brett Payne both claimed to have been the one to find that glove. In Moscow Police Department document number 52, which was written by Brett Payne, it says, "I noticed a black glove laying in the parking lot approximately 25 feet from the front door. The glove was laying palm up and appeared to have been laying in that spot for a couple of days. I nudged the glove with the toe of my boot and found it was frozen to the ground. Upon further examination, there appeared to be a dark, fluid-like substance on the glove, consistent with dried blood." He then states that the glove is a Polar Penguin brand glove with a rubberized palm and fingers and is often used in concrete work. And this is that Polar Penguin glove. And the blood found on this glove belonged to an unknown male. But this unknown male DNA wasn't the only unknown male DNA found on the crime scene. The unknown male DNA on that glove became known as unknown male D. And there were other unknown male DNAs. Male A, B, C, D, E. What was originally labeled unknown male A was the DNA, the touch DNA, found on the button of the knife sheath, which later matched Brian Koberger. Unknown male B came from the handrail between the first and second floor. And unknown male C comes from blood collected from Jack DeCour's apartment. We're getting back to that, trust me. And unknown male D came from the glove. Unknown male E was from the Pennsylvania trash pool, and it was BK's dad. But there were also other male DNAs found on the scene, which they didn't assign a letter to. Something of significant importance was a DNA mixture that was found under Maddie's fingernails. And that DNA consisted of a mixed DNA from 3 males. And the most important part of all of that is that all of that DNA, from the additional DNA found on the sheath, all the way to the DNA under Maddie's fingernails, none of that matched Brian Koberger. None of it. Not the extra DNA on the sheath, not the DNA on the glove, not the DNA on the handrail, not the DNA under the victim's fingernails. None of it. None of it matched BK, except that single spot of transferable touch DNA found on the snap button of the sheath. That additional DNA alone should be enough for people to question why that's not talked about more, for one, but also the conviction of Brian Koberger. While that touch DNA was matched, we do know that touch DNA can be transferred. And we'll go further into all that when we talk about the labs. But the fact that there's unknown male blood found on the scene that does not match Koberger, that should be concerning. I don't understand how it's not. I don't understand how anyone can hear that and then turn around and get angry at people who are asking questions about it. I want to know why you aren't asking questions about it. But there's one more thing I really want to talk about. When you're looking at all these photos, I don't necessarily encourage you to do that because they are really gruesome. I cried that night after they dropped. Like, it hurts. It hurts to look at them. As some of them are just so graphic, especially in Xana's room. But as difficult as they are to look at, as heartbreaking and horrible, they were also extremely revealing. Because all in all, Xana's room looked exactly how I would have imagined her room to look. Like I said in my last video, Xana fought for her life in that bedroom. But the scene in Maddie's room, it doesn't look quite right to me. Trigger warning, I'm going to put it up real quick. Because you can't see Kaylee or Maddie, you can only really see some of the splatter on the wall. But as you can see, yes, there is some splatter on the walls, beside where Kaylee was laying and above where Maddie was laying. But the extent of Kaylee's injuries alone, without even Maddie's injuries, which were also gruesome, I would think that this room would look a lot more like Xana's room. I feel that based on Kaylee's injuries, Maddie's room should have been just as gruesome. And knowing that there was blood splatter outside of Maddie's room, on the ceiling outside of her door, on the bathroom door, and knowing that there was cast-off blood of Kaylee's on the wall above the stairway leading from the second floor to the first floor, in my opinion, it makes the whole, it seems like some of the victims were placed, a lot more plausible. Because how did their blood get in those places if they were both attacked in Maddie's bed inside of her room? And I've heard some people say about the blood cast off on the second floor that maybe it was from the killer's knife. It's to be expected that the victim's bloods would mix. And okay, maybe, but you're telling me that the killer's knife was so covered in blood that just him lifting it flung Kaylee's blood on that wall, but there wasn't enough blood on him to leave a blood trail through the house? There's something else in Maddie's room that I want to talk about even more than the weird blood splatter. And I feel like this is something a lot of people need to be talking about. Remember how in the last video we talked about Murphy and how strange it was that Murphy was found in Kaylee's room with Kaylee's door open and he had no blood on him. There was no blood found on Murphy. And if that is true, then what is this? What is this? Because it looks like we are looking at Murphy's bloody paw prints beside Maddie's bed. Those are paw prints. That clearly means that Murphy did get into the blood. But y'all, it is well documented that Murphy had no blood on him when he was found. When the police arrived, Murphy was clean. And there are several documents that talk about this. In the Moscow Police Department, document number 123, it says, a dog was taken out of Kaylee's room and transported to the Humane Society for safekeeping. It didn't appear the dog had gone into the rooms where the murders were committed because it didn't have any visible blood on its body. And the Moscow Police Department, document number 125, states, the door to Kaylee's bedroom was open upon his arrival, and the dog was laying on the bed. And this report is actually all about Murphy, that poor baby. And it says on the first page, the dog appeared timid or scared and didn't react to our presence. They ended up shutting her door, and at some point, Murphy moved from Kaylee's bed to underneath her desk. And the document says, the dog was timid and took some coaxing to move from under the desk, but did not appear to have any obvious injuries or stains on its body or paws. Due to the amount of blood inside the bedroom where the victims were located and the lack of blood on or around the dog, I don't believe the dog was on or around the victims. Once Murphy was removed from the King Road house, he was given to the Humane Society for safekeeping until they could interview Jack and clear him and then let him take Murphy. So Murphy was looked over by the Moscow Police Department for blood. Then he was looked over at the Humane Society. If there would have been blood on Murphy, he would not have been allowed to be released to Jack. Murphy had no blood on his paws or his body. Yet, as we can see, at some point, Murphy had to have blood on his paws because he left these paw prints beside Maddie's bed. So maybe an even better question than who cleaned up the latent shoe prints should be, who gave Murphy a bath? Who cleaned Murphy? Because I know that dogs can clean themselves, but they're not like cats, okay? Cats are very meticulous in the way they clean themselves. Dogs will clean themselves. But Murphy has this very light-colored, long, curly fur. And I once had my little precious girl, her name was Daisy. She was a terrier mix. And a lot like Murphy, she had very curly fur, especially on her paws. Just her little curls overflowed her little paws. And if my Daisy, and Daisy was a darker color, she was like a brown-black, but if she would have gotten anything on her paws, her hair trapped so much stuff because it was long and it was curly, like Murphy's. I don't see how Murphy could have cleaned it off of himself. that much blood on his paws in order to leave those bloody paw prints. Of all the alarming things I saw in this photo dump, those bloody paw prints shook me. I still feel a little shook. Because how are those prints there? But Murphy was clean. And I am aware that in some of the King Road footage that was released not long ago, that was obtained by Jules with True Crime, that you can see Murphy roaming the neighborhood about 6 that morning. He wanders over by the dumpster and over towards Jack's house. But we also know that when the police arrived, Murphy was in the house on Kaylee's bed, clean. There are a lot of real mysteries in this case. And that is why there are thousands of us that keep talking about it and keep asking these questions. We're not doing it to hurt anyone. We're not doing it to hurt the family and to put them through more trauma than they're already having to live with. We're not doing it to disrespect anyone. We're not doing it, well, I can't speak for everyone, but most of us are not even doing it for clicks or views or money. We're doing it because something is very, very wrong here. And as I've said before, the lives of the 4 young people who were taken is worth the discomfort of asking these questions. More people need to be asking these questions, in my opinion. Because so far, we have gone through the timeline. We've gone through the victim's injuries. We've gone through the evidence found on the crime scene. And none of it makes sense. None of it. So I am not done here. We are not done here. Because while I do understand that a lot of people may be choosing to believe the official narrative, because let's be honest, the official narrative is the best case scenario for these kids. That they were all asleep, that it was fairly quick, that they did not suffer. None of us want to think that they suffered. I would love to believe that they were sleeping and was not acutely aware of what was happening to them. So I get why, especially the loved ones of the victims, would really want this to be true. They would want to know that Bryan Kohberger was caught, that the perpetrator who did this is behind bars, and that he will never be out, and that he was the only one, that there is no one who contributed to this horrific crime that is still walking free, smug and happy about getting away with it. I understand why they are defending the official narrative so fiercely. But unfortunately, there is a lot that indicates that that's not the way this happened. And though I wish for nothing more than peace and comfort for these families, I wish that I could take everything away for them. I wish I could intervene and this never have happened. I wish I could build a time machine. If I could, I would time travel right back to November 12th, 2022. And none of these families would ever experience any of this. But it did happen. And what happened to Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana matters. The truth matters. Getting to the truth matters. So I'm not done asking questions. I'm not done. So in the next part, I really want to go through the lab results with everybody of all the different DNA found and who it matched and all of that. But I feel like if we do that now, a lot of context is going to be lost. So I think in the next one, we should talk about the evidence for and against Bryan Kohberger, what the state was going to produce against him, and whether that evidence is enough. Is it enough to say that Bryan Kohberger is truly guilty? And I'll let y'all decide. So I am going to get started on that. But like I mentioned at the very beginning, here in Arkansas, we are facing a major ice storm. And chances are we might lose power. I don't want to. The last time we lost power in a snowstorm, I went without power for 5 days and was traumatized a little. But that means I might not have a lot of access to electronics. I can charge my phone here and there, but it may be a minute before you see me again, depending on what happens. So pray for me. Cross your fingers for me. Please, God, don't let Amber freeze to death. Let's all say it together. Please let Amber keep her power. But I am going to get this video edited and out as soon as possible and get started on that next one. I just can't necessarily promise when that will be, seeing as how we are facing an impending snowpocalypse. But I hope y'all have a great day. Hopefully I will get this video out. Like I said, I don't know what's going to happen. Ideally by like Sunday, but who knows really. Depending on what day it is right now, I hope you either are having or had a great weekend and that you were warmer than we are inevitably going to be. And if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for exploring this case with me. Because contrary to some people's opinions, I really do deeply care about this and these 4 victims. I want us to know and not just believe that justice was served for them. So thank you for accompanying me on that mission. Have a great day, y'all, and I'll see you next time.